Well, good afternoon from the East Coast. It's Deacon Frank Luke at the University of Massachusetts, and on behalf of CCMA, we'd like to welcome you to the Build a Better Break Trip Pilgrimage 101 webinar. And today's panelists, or today's presenters, are Beth Barsadi and Paul Lichon. I hope I said that. John Paul Lichon. Hope I said that correctly. We went over that a moment ago, but I already forgot it. So we will be getting started here, but I'd like to at least introduce these folks to you, and then we'll turn it over to them. John Paul is an assistant director of retreats, pilgrimages, and spirituality at the University of Notre Dame. Notre Dame. This year, his office will offer 11 pilgrimages to various national and international destinations, including Philadelphia, which they went during the papal visit, Montreal, Mexico City, Ireland, Rome, Phoenix, and more. Prior to his time at Notre Dame, John Paul served at SMU Catholic Campus Ministry in Dallas, Texas. He received his Master of Arts in Theology from the University of Notre Dame and served for 2 years at Nativity Catholic Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. He is married and has a 3-year-old daughter. And Beth is an assistant director for faith formation at the University of Portland. This past summer, Beth led a group of students on the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, and now she is organizing a 2016 World Youth Day trip to Krakow, Poland. Prior to her work in campus ministry, Beth worked in Catholic churches in Iowa and Oregon Oregon, as director of adult faith formation, as well as pastoral associate director of religious education. She earned her Master's of Divinity degree from the University of Notre Dame. She also serves on the large Portland Board of Directors. So I'd like to welcome both of them. And at this point, I'll turn it over to you folks.
Thanks. Great. Thank you for that introduction. We are very excited to be with you all and to share a little bit of our experience of planning these exciting and transformative pilgrimage experiences with our students. And again, thanks, Deacon Frank, for your generous introduction. I'm not typically this dreary and yellow, I think. I think my camera's not working very well, but anyway, it's good to be with you. As Deacon Frank said, I've been working at Notre Dame for about 5 years, and about 3 years ago, I was tasked with kind of expanding our pilgrimage menu, and it's really kind of taken I don't know, a big wave of interest has definitely grown through our students. So we do offer a lot of trips now. It's kind of a staple of our ministry here.
Hi, and I'm Beth Barsodi, and I think, I've worked at University of Portland for about 3.5 years, and I think it was I don't even think a couple months had passed before I decided that I thought that the students would need to go on a pilgrimage. So I worked with my boss for a couple of years before we got it up and running, and was able to take students on the Camino de Santiago this past summer. And now in our setup and campus ministry here, we'll take one annual pilgrimage, and it was added to my job description. So World Youth Day this year is our piece of that. So I'm happy to be with you all today, and for JP for saying, let's do this.
That's right. So just for a little quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today, Beth's going to start us off talking a little bit about what is pilgrimage and why you might want to go on a pilgrimage. And then I'll talk a little bit about kind of myths behind pilgrimage and what kind of myths and reality might be around the corner with those as well. And then we'll go into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of how you might plan a pilgrimage. And then we'll follow up with any questions that you might have. So I think at the outset, one thing that we certainly will offer is any resources that we talk about or share with you on the webinar today, we are more than welcome in sharing things like budgets or syllabus or itinerary schedules, whatever it is, totally free game. We've worked really hard to do some of these trips, and so we are happy to share the resources with you if you desire. So our emails are listed on the first slide. We'd be happy to email out this presentation as well, so if you want to get a hold of us, you can email us there as well.
Thanks, JP. So this first question of just why would you even go on a pilgrimage? I worked with some students on another project, and I'm like, you guys, we need an elevator speech, and the best elevator speeches start with why. So when I think of why, I just think our world is so full of input. It's full of data. We're plugged in, our students are plugged in, but we're really longing for a depth and a search for meaning. I just see that in our students all the time is they want to know more and they want to go deeper. So pilgrimages really invite us to leave behind technology, and gives us space to go within ourselves. And it's really that outward journey, and sometimes in pilgrimage the walking, but even other pilgrimages there's this outward journey and there's difficult moments, we're uncomfortable, and that's that path that helps us go on the inward journey. And really it's this journey that's the most important place, where we're looking for really ultimately God. So it's this outward journey that reflects sort of our inward journey, and we want to invite students on that journey. The reality is this journey began. I mean, really, it began at birth. This idea that that we're really drawn to Christ, and the pilgrimage is an intentional time to go on that journey. And we really hope that that sort of being in a different space allows students to open their hearts and minds and maybe open to that, the movement of the Spirit. So I have just a couple of points besides my elevator speech that I wanted to, that we talked about sharing with you guys today. One is the outward journey that reflects the inward. And then I also wanted to share just sort of an experience from that, as well as insights from anthropologists and the importance of the land. So when I think of the outward journey reflecting the inward, it really is that idea that this has already begun. And I was on the Camino de Santiago, and they have pilgrim masses every night that are optional in the major towns. So we would go to these pilgrim masses, and at the end there would be a blessing for the pilgrims. I think, my Spanish is okay, so I think that most of them had a different blessing each time. And it was one of the first times I heard this prayer in Spanish. It talked about Christ being the way, but it was in Spanish. So Cristo es el camino. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're on the Camino. Christ is the way, and this is the path that we're walking. And it was this insight that I had not had before, of realizing we're physically journeying on this path, but this path that we're on is actually the journey of becoming Christ-like. And in a very intentional way, I stepped out of my daily routine, and we walked this path and took time out without a bunch of technology, without the daily requirements of life, and we're able to think about our faith journey. Now, not everybody who came on our Camino was Christian, but it's this journey of getting on the path. So really our journey has begun, and it's an outward journey that's really reflecting this lifelong journey. It was a pretty powerful experience for me. So that journey allows space for transformation. Sometimes we get on the path, we get off the path, we get back on the path. And we're really sharing in experiences that pilgrims before us and all the places we're going to talk about have been on. So it wasn't just my journey on that earth, but all the people before me, to open that up. Another thing, when I was thinking about this question of why do we pilgrimage, I had read this really lovely book called Pilgrimage: The Sacred Art, and talked about really how pilgrimage is a part of many different cultures and traditions and religions. And the author cited Victor and Edith Turner, and these anthropologists talked about sort of two things that happen in a pilgrimage, and the words that they used were liminality and communitas. We think of liminality as, my favorite way of thinking about it is that spot on the bridge where you've left one side of the river and you're on your way to the other side of the river, but you're in between. So we've left where we were, but we're not yet at our destination. And going through a pilgrimage, experiencing a pilgrimage, is really allowing us to be in that liminal space where we haven't really integrated our experience of pilgrimage into where we're going, but we know we've left where we were. And I think that that's a really important opportunity that we can offer our students in a very concrete, physical way that fits our spiritual journey. The other one, communitas, is used to really explain the oneness that happens on the Camino or on the Camino on a pilgrimage, where there's this beautiful process where when you are a pilgrim, there's a leveling of the playing field where it doesn't matter what your degree is in or what your job is. What matters is the human that you are in front of this other human. Sort of melts away the social edict, the stereotypes, all of those things, and you're together as one. And this experience of communitas, which I'm sure many of you have experienced before in other trips and experiences, is done, happens naturally on pilgrimages. And it's an experience that I think we would like our students to know about the church, that that's the ideal, that we're pilgrims on this larger journey, and there's a oneness about this. My last point, thinking about why go on a pilgrimage, comes from, I had gone on when I was in grad school, I had this phenomenal opportunity to go to the Holy Lands. And my professor made it feel more like a pilgrimage than a course, although it was a summer course. We read scripture readings before we went to each of the sites. He gave us lots of time in each of the sites to pray with scripture, to walk, and to just be present. But one of the things, my professor's name was Virgil Elizondo, one of the things he kept saying to us was that this land, the land we're on, is part of Revelation, that it is part of the story of Christ, of God revealing Christ to us, of God's fullness of revelation. So that land, it was that Jesus was born there. Jesus wasn't born in Portland, Oregon. So there's something else about that land that we're coming to know. And I didn't get some magical understanding when I, put my hand in the little hole where supposedly touches the rock where Jesus was born. At some level, I thought I was going to get this jolt or this experience, this power, and I didn't. But it resonated with me that earth is important. And I think when we talk about where we go on pilgrimage, to not underestimate the land. So just sort of to think through that, when I think about why go on pilgrimage, I think about that outward journey that's reflecting the inward and creating space for that transformation. I think of the anthropology of creating an opportunity for students to experience the liminality and the communitas that we strive for in the Christian journey. And I think about the importance of the land and that piece of our journey. So it gives you a little sense of that. There's so many reasons to go on pilgrimage, but we're trying to keep it short. I mean, we might not be going like our medieval pilgrims and warding off evils and honoring promises made to God, but there's still some deep longing and intentionality of that physical journey. So.
Great. Thanks, Beth. So if this is something that you're thinking about doing, of planning a pilgrimage trip, we thought we would start with some of the myths that you might encounter along the way. And I think the first one is pretty obvious, is that it's super expensive. I think that it can be super expensive, but I think that also pilgrimage trips can also be economical if you kind of put in the time and the effort and roll up your sleeves a little bit. So yeah, I think if you're willing to, put in a little elbow grease, you can really kind of change the bottom line. I mean, for example, if you just even thinking about lodging, if you're, say, in Rome, obviously a city, a well-known city, a very touristy city, obviously a night's sleep might be a little more expensive than, say, a rural place. But if you're in Rome and you're spending maybe $100 per night per person on lodging, and you times that times 20 people times 7 nights that you're there, you're talking already, let's say, $14,000 just for lodging. But if you find a different place to stay, maybe a retreat center, maybe a monastery, a hostel, if you're open to more simple lodging accommodations, and say you only spend $50 a night per person, well, then you've just cut your budget in half for lodging. Instead of spending $14,000 for the group, now you're just spending $7,000 for the group. And if you kind of then take that on to other aspects of planning, so lodging, but then say transportation, say food that you include, what kind of activities you include, you have a lot of power to kind of change what's included on a trip to make it more or less expensive as much as you want to. The second one we wanted to talk about were that you can only go to certain places, and the ones we have listed there are just examples, but places like Rome, Holy Land, Lourdes, other places I think of are Fatima, Medjugorje, Mexico City, the Camino. I mean, some of the most popular places, and certainly those are wonderful and beautiful pilgrimage destinations. But I also kind of like love to think outside the box of where else can you go. My line to our students is always that, well, God is everywhere. God is present in every place. So you literally can go on pilgrimage anywhere you want to if you so desire. The third one there is that you have to use a pilgrimage company. And I think that obviously it's probably easier and it's a lot less headache to kind of outsource your pilgrimage planning to a company. And certainly we do that from time to time. Beth and I are actually planning World Youth Day together next summer, and we are using a company to do that just because of all of the intricacies of planning two different campuses, going to World Youth Day with millions of people. So there are reasons to use a company, but I think there's also other ways and other destinations where you don't have to use a company if you don't want to. Obviously, most of those places are trying to make a profit, so you are paying a little bit of a premium to do that. And so I think, again, if you're willing to kind of roll up your sleeves, then planning it on your own, you can definitely kind of take charge of your bottom line a little bit better. The next one is it's just vacation plus daily mass, which I think is sometimes true. I think that, we all can kind of fall into that tendency of, or just think about like how many churches we've probably been in where people are more experiencing the church through a camera lens than they are through their own eyes, or that you go to all these churches and you don't actually ever pray there or light a candle or take a moment to really kind of process the places and the impact that those places might have on your own life of faith. So I think that's obviously I think a dangerous one that we can really fall into on a pilgrimage, that because you can, especially if you're in a place like Rome, that you're probably going to include some more touristy sites too, that it could have the tendency of feeling like a vacation if you're not very attentive to the ways that you contextualize the experience and kind of set up the experience. But in its truest sense, I think a pilgrimage is truly a pilgrimage. It's not just vacation plus a little bit of prayer time. But a lot of that has to go into how you prepare your students and how you kind of contextualize the experience while you're there. And then finally, I think one of the biggest ones too is that my boss will never agree to this, which I think is definitely true. I think the best example of this was last year I planned a trip to Hawaii for a pilgrimage all about St. Damien of Molokai. I'm not sure if you know of that story, but most people, when I tell them we did a Hawaii pilgrimage, I get the typical eye roll, I get the chuckle, I get the, yeah, right, come on, that's ridiculous, which is obviously a reaction that I was always expecting. But if you know the story of St. Damien, who was the leper priest that served the leper colony there in Molokai, who volunteered to go there on his own will, if you know that story, you know how powerful that story is and what an impact it can have on your life of faith. There's actually two saints from that area in Hawaii, St. Damien and St. Marianne Cope, and a third one that's in the process as well, Brother Joseph Dutton. And I think the key there for this one is to plant seeds early. So I remember pitching this to my supervisor, kind of a year in advance, just kind of like, hey, I have this crazy idea. It really is a crazy idea, but we're thinking about this Hawaii pilgrimage. Thankfully, she didn't give me the eye roll. She took it very well. She was very supportive even from the outset. But it did take a couple of months of kind of planting the seeds. But then I think the biggest thing is just kind of just reminding people of the mission of why you're going there. You're not just going there for a vacation. You're going there because of this story of Father Damien and what an amazing witness of faith he was, and then helping our students learn about that story and engage it, and then and then transforming that into their own lives and kind of translating that. Well, what is that? What does Father Damien's story mean as an example to my own life of faith? So those are just a few myths that we kind of wanted to break a little bit. And now we wanted to transition a little bit more into the practical how-tos.
So this slide just shows you sort of where we're going in this how to plan a pilgrimage. We'll start with selecting a place, some of the logistics, marketing and application, and then pilgrimage prep and follow-up. So we'll start with where. I mean, it's trying to decide like where you go. So John Paul and I were thinking about this, and we came up. I mean, the anthropologists that I mentioned earlier, they have these like very like specific ways and names that they call pilgrimages, styles, I guess. So we came up with our own. So John Paul, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll highlight those for you. Traditional, familial, local, national, and other. So when we were thinking of traditional, those were all the ones that John Paul already mentioned. You think of actually, when we were planning this, John Paul was like, well, like any of the ones that would be in the brochures, the booklets. So you can think of all the places that really Christians around the world know of: the Holy Land, Rome, Santiago de Compostela, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Lourdes, Fatima, Medjugorje, Taizé, just the big ones you would imagine. Then you think of familial ones. This is really based on mission and history. When I think both of us work at Holy Cross institutions, so when I think of familial things, we were talking about, gosh, we could go anywhere where Holy Cross has a presence around the globe. We could go to Uganda and celebrate the Ugandan martyrs. We could go to Peru. We could go to Chile. We have Holy Cross locally in Arizona, here, all over. So we could come up with like different visits that way. Anything that really helps us claim our identity. The first saint within Holy Cross is Brother Andre, and he's in Montreal. So we could go to Montreal and learn more about our history that way. And Brother Andre, Saint Andre, was a doorman, and he had this charism of hospitality. So we can go and learn his journey, and in turn learn more about who we are and what shapes us and forms us as a Holy Cross institution that lives out those charisms. You can say if you're at a Franciscan university, going to Assisi might be really important. Or Benedictines, maybe you go to one of a Benedictine monastery. I know for the first time this summer I went to St. John's in Collegeville, Minnesota, and gosh, that felt like a pilgrimage to me. I've heard so much about it. Got to see the St. John's Bible, got to walk around the lakes, and there was even a pilgrimage to another side of one of the lakes. And so that was a pilgrimage. And I got to learn more about the Benedictines and their hospitality as well. I know Notre Dame as the Fighting Irish, their desire to go to Ireland, I'm sure, comes out of that rootedness. Jesuit universities, you can partner with other Jesuit organizations. There's the Kino Border Initiative in Nogales, Arizona. So trying to think of those things that help us understand, like familial, the things that help us root in where we are, that there is something special about your university. And we want students to graduate from our university having lived some of that charism. So where are the places that embody that? Then you think of national and local. This one, I'm thinking about this. Portland has a grotto, and one of our students for the last couple of years has led a pilgrimage on Good Friday, walking the 7 miles to our grotto. They do take the bus back, but just like a simple local one, like what's happening here. Very aware that this next week we start the Year of Mercy, and each cathedral has been asked to have a door of mercy for people to walk through. So maybe one of the things that we're tossing around here in campus ministry at University of Portland is, could we plan a pilgrimage to the Door of Mercy? And maybe that's how we'll end our year at the Year of Mercy and get student involvement in that way, and just do a local one that doesn't cost any money, maybe the bus ticket on the way home. From that, the California missions are a nice close place for us, but also a local place, and it shares with us our national history, places that way. or other saints in the United States. Are there places we could go? So we think of national and local. We don't need to think far and wide and expensive. We can think like what else is within our area. Um, Other things, the outside the box, kind of what John Paul was talking about. I have this strong desire, and I've posed it to my director, but still like musing with it. But maybe even going to El Salvador, and not as a mission trip. I think service definitely has a place within ministry and doing service trips. But is there something about going to the land where the massacres took place and seeing where Archbishop Oscar Romero was martyred, um, to bear witness to the people and to the land and the importance of that? So thinking about that, I think World Youth Day would fall under that. We'll be doing that, and we have been doing that when it comes around every 3 years. So just a couple ideas of our different traditional, familial, local, national, and other. So moving on to our next point is logistics. And one of my directors has said to me, Beth, I think you get to the big picture through the details. So sometimes I get a little like crazy with these details. So I was trying to think, like, for the purpose of this and talking to John Paul, like, how could I like lay out a process? And for us at the University of Portland, it really begins with a proposal. And then we have very specific proposal guidelines, which I'd be happy to share as well. But I needed to say, what are the goals of this? When are we going? Who are staff support? What's the funding? What are visas and regulations and all that type of stuff? And I needed to do that at least 6 months in advance of the experience. So I had to do a proposal. And then I really came up with a timeline. I tend to go backwards first. So I know you can't probably see it very well. I just did a screenshot of my tentative timeline for the Camino when I started that process. But I was like, okay, I want us to go on the Camino in May. So I picked the dates that fit within the university calendar, graduation, our Holy Cross communities availability. And then I sort of planned backwards from there, all the way up to when I need to have my proposal submitted so that it can happen. So you'll see that it says, proposal submitted, an information session. I always hold an information session with facts and figures, details that they'd want to know. It also like drums up good interest. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then making the applications live. I had to create the application within our systems. Due dates for applications. For the Camino, we actually held interviews. That's not necessary. Selection and notification deposit. So just creating a timeline. In conjunction with the timeline budget, an itinerary is creating a budget. This is a pretty rough sketch of my tentative or my estimated budget. Obviously, the point of it up there is not so you can see all the numbers, although I'm happy to send it to you. But I was just breaking down, like, what are all the possible expenses? I mean, this is what we do in our own life. Are there any preparation expenses? What kind of transportation do we have getting to wherever we're going while we're there, moving around on the ground? Meals and lodging. Sometimes meals are included, sometimes they aren't. And what expense is that? I also have in there fee paid to University of Portland. Some of the questions, the way we did the Camino was that the students had to pay the university for the things that we were providing. So any type of group transportation I purchased on behalf of everybody, and they paid me for that. But everything else was really on their own on the Camino, but I gave them a budget of everything that would be projected. So this is about how much food costs every day. Lodging they paid for their own each night because it was just €10 a night. So but with World Youth Day, the fee paid to University of Portland is not a fee for us to attend the staffing. It's really just the everything is included. So for that is a little bit different in that way. So creating that budget. An itinerary, this is really helpful to have as well, of like where you're going, where you're staying. If it's a walking pilgrimage, are you in different places each night? What are you doing? So with World Youth Day this summer, for the most part, it's on the World Youth Day website. But John Paul and I are going to work with our group to go on some experiences, some further pilgrimage experiences on the days on the end. The other pieces that we put on there, was just really thinking about who can I collaborate with? Like what are the departments on campus that need to be involved in this? I think about our health center. We did a health forum for students who were going internationally. I collaborated with our general counsel for travel waivers, so what kind of waivers you need to be doing. So starting those conversations earlier of who to collaborate with or other affiliates. When we went to the Camino, our first days that we were there, we stayed at the Fundación Ortega, and it was where our students go for study abroad. So saying like, okay, who else is in our sphere, our network that we can collaborate with in that way? And then there's a whole host of international questions if you decide an international pilgrimage experience with waivers, vaccinations, passports, visas, all those type of things. And I really worked closely with our general counsel to make sure that I was following that. And University of Portland actually has an international checklist that I was able to follow in regards to that. All right, some logistics. And then our next slide is marketing and application. This was a slide I just threw a photo on. John Paul was like, more photos, less words. So this is a World Youth Day information session, as you can read, and we actually have a student who creates these flyers. Now this one's not particularly fancy, but I thought I like how she put all the people around it. But my favorite question to ask is who else would be interested in supporting this experience when I think about marketing and application. And so I went through like our entire website and I was like, okay, who are the people, what departments really would want their students to go on this experience? So is there international languages? Is there history, communications? A lot of professors at the university want their students to have these experiences because it informs their studies and vice versa. So I created this big long list of who on our campus, and I wrote professors' names, then I sent each one of them an email with the information session on it so that they could invite their people to do this. And it really broadens it. It makes it a university-wide thing, not a campus ministry only event. So I crafted that list and sent it out. Then I like to hold an information session. Again, this is just to create the buzz. It gives you announcements. We do announcements at Mass. Our students on their email system, when they log in, there's a list of announcements. I put it there. So I try and get it in front of students any way possible. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we've been using a lot lately as well. At the information session, I really do facts and figures. Like, what are the details? I want to give them a sheet that they could hand to their parent or guardian and say, like, this is the information, this is what I need to know, this is the projected cost. Oftentimes I'll have students share if they've been there before or been on a World Youth Day experience before, and then give the students the timeline and itinerary. Then for application and potentially interview, I really do applications, basic information, and then I mean, these are only the 2 official pilgrimages that I've led, but we do short essay questions, and I really try and make it clear in both the information session as well as in the application that this is not a vacation and that this is not just an international trip or a national trip. Sometimes people just want to go. And by all means, the Spirit works through that. When I went to the Holy Lands, when I was in grad school, I was like, oh, fun experience. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, really. And then it has continued to feed me throughout my journey and to where I am now. So by all means, we want students who are just struck by that as well, and we allow the Spirit to work in that. But I'm really clear in my application and in the facts and figures handout that this is a pilgrimage, not an experience, so that it starts forming them, obviously. And John Paul will talk a little bit more about this in the preparation, but that this is something different. I like short answer questions like why are you doing this? What drew you to this particular experience? This for World Youth Day we asked like how do you function in a group? Like what's the role you generally play? And then for something like the Camino de Santiago, I was really wanting to be face to face with students before we accepted them to make sure that they physically, I mean, not physically, like I think we did a training plan, so I wasn't worried about that, but I wanted to make sure that they really understood. And we had that one-on-one time in interviews. So we did interviews with all of our students for that purpose too. So.
Great. So after that's all set, then I think you really get to, I think, the heart of the matter, which I think probably the most important step for a pilgrimage is the preparation that goes into it. Um, so I wrote kind of three goals here, but I think that one is helping our students to learn what a pilgrimage is and what we're inviting them into on a pilgrimage. So I think that's one of the most important things is to talk about these themes of that this is an intentional journey, that this, what Beth was talking about earlier, that this is an outward kind of journey of our inward journey of faith. And so that naturally, this pilgrimage experience is going to include prayer. So in the preparation, to have times of prayer, to introduce themes that you might be encountering on the retreat. So Beth mentioned our Montreal pilgrimage. So we learn about the life of Saint Andre before we go. We learn about themes of healing because there was a lot of healings associated with his ministry. We talk about Saint Joseph, who was a huge influence in his own life. We talk about all of these kind of stories and people and context around the reasons why we're going there. So the history and the stories and the culture is all a part of that as well. And that all connects then to the kind of so what question of why are we doing this and what impact might it have on your own life. I think that preparation and then obviously also the follow-up to that too. So both the before and the after and also the during the pilgrimage too. I mean, you have to be attentive to all of those movements through the trip planning process. That all of these things kind of form the experience just as much as the pilgrimage itself. The before and the after, I think, are just as important as the actual trip, however long it might be. Here we do partner with our theology department on some of our trips, so we do offer academic credit for many of our trips. Not all of them, but I do find that's a great way, obviously, to get buy-in from the students. When you put a credit on the course, it just helps so much in terms of their investment in preparing for the experience. It puts a little bit of onus on them. We just do them pass-fail. It's not a huge commitment. It's not as rigorous, obviously, as a 400-level theology course, but I think it does just kind of up the ante on what the students' expectations are to prepare for the trip and also the follow-up from it. So this is just a small screenshot you can't really see, but of our syllabus for Ireland that we had this fall. Again, I'd be happy to share those materials with anybody. But I do find that if it's possible for you to kind of have an academic component, it's a huge plus from us. But at the very least, even if you don't have the academic component, but having at least 2, 3, maybe even 4 meetings beforehand, I think the level of kind of preparation kind of speaks to the level of engagement that you'll get on the pilgrimage itself. So I think the more you kind of put into the preparation, the more the students are going to get out of the trip. Which then obviously leads to the pilgrimage itself. And I think something that's really important about a pilgrimage is always to keep an open disposition of how the Holy Spirit might work. So you can get all the details prepared, all just set all of the pilgrimage talks and themes all set up, the prayer experiences, whatever is included, you can have all of that set. But if your flight is delayed or you miss a connection, or our students were in Ireland and they showed up to the hotel and it was literally shut down, even though they had booked there. So things like that happen, and you have to be open to change and just being open to the Spirit where it might lead you. And then also I think another thing important on a pilgrimage to be aware of is that balance again of the logistical concerns of keeping the schedule and getting people from place to place, but then also the big picture content to remember, why are we on this trip? What are we inviting our students into? Why are we visiting this particular place? Sometimes when we're so caught up in the details of like, okay, we just got to get out the door by 8:30, we need to be eating breakfast by 8 then, we need to be waking up by 7, and then you forget when you get to the first church at 9 o'clock of like, okay, well, why are we here? Okay, you all go inside, pray for a little while, and come out. It's just being aware of those big picture when you get to the church to have kind of any material set or whatever kind of talk or introduction you might have for that place to really kind of, again, put that place into context for the students. Again, constantly like, why are we here and what are we inviting our students into? And then after the pilgrimage is done, obviously then the follow-up. The follow-up is really important as well. The seeds that you plant on a pilgrimage obviously certainly might only take days to kind of develop, but certainly weeks and months and years beyond. You never know when those seeds that you plant on pilgrimage might come to fruition. So It's kind of a must-include part of our pilgrimage too, is having some kind of follow-up to it. In our academic courses, that's easy. They have some kind of final project that they're required to do. But for the ones that don't include academic credit, we always have some kind of gathering or processing in the follow-up to again continue that processing and continue that growth that they might have had on the trip. And so it's more than just a reunion. It's more than just having a dinner and, oh, great to have the group back together again. It always includes some kind of intentional prayer, some kind of discussion or questions and whatnot. So again, I think just so important to have all three parts: the preparation, the trip itself, obviously, and then the follow-up. So with that, I think we probably talked a little too long, but we just open it up to any questions that people have or any comments. Certainly be open to any experiences of pilgrimage from any of our listeners as well. So,
okay. Well, thank you, John Paul and Beth. I think you covered everything, but let's see if there are any questions. If anybody has a question, please feel free to either raise your hand or send the question over in the question box, and we'll pass that over to them. Just imagine the Jeopardy theme in your head at this point. Dum, 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 dum. Okay. Any questions? All right. I'll turn it back to you if you want to make some closing comments, and then we can wrap it up. And of course, as we know, this has been recorded and is available for folks to go back to listen to, so they can really get deeper into what you both said. So I'll turn it back to you, JP and Beth.
sure. Yeah, the only last thing I would add is just that I strongly encourage people to engage in this ministry. Actually, one thing we didn't mention was I find pilgrimage to be such a wonderful point of evangelization for our students as well. I mean, it's not a hard sell to advertise a World Youth Day or an international trip or even a local or national trip as well. I mean, we just had our California missions trip application deadline yesterday, as well as our World Youth Day, or excuse me, our Camino application due yesterday, and we got about equal responses to both. But they're just so easy. They're such an easy sell to our students. And so what happens is I find that you get such a diversity of students that engage in the pilgrimage experience. You get everybody from your typical campus ministry groupie that comes to everything you offer just because you offer it, to the kid that just saw it on a whim, or a friend went on a different trip and was like, hey, that sounds fun. I've been wanting to learn how to pray a little bit more. And you get everything in between. So I just love that part of pilgrimage planning, is that you get kind of everybody who they are, and it's actually kind of a low barrier entry point into kind of reaching that student that might not show up for anything else, but they might apply to go on the Camino because it sounds fun to walk across Spain for 10 days.
Yeah, I agree with what John Paul shared. I mean, the diversity of students that we've gotten on ours, I always like, we're in the Pacific Northwest, so to be creative and saying, like, we know that students have a lot of needs and deep needs, and how can we creatively respond to that and put them in a space where God can do God's work? I mean, God works everywhere. So for us to do a pilgrimage, maybe we can capture those spiritual, not religious students who actually have these very deep experiences, but not words for them. And so in that time, in that mentoring, in that community, in that experience, then we can help people learn the words to name their experiences.
Very good.
So we're happy to share any resources or whatnot. Just send us an email. We're happy to share any ideas, or if you're just trying to learn the ropes or whatnot, we're happy to walk through any of that with you. So
that's great. Thank you so much to both of you. That was a very complete presentation and enjoyable to listen to. You both have a future in this webinar business. And again, thank you for being with us today. And to all of you, thank you. Feel free to get in touch with the folks over CCMA through Krista if you have any further questions or want to get their email addresses should you not have it. But first of all, I just wanted to secondly, I'd like to mention from Krista, thank you for attending this webinar series, Build a Better Break Trip. We hope you've enjoyed this series, learned a lot, and shared with others. And many thanks to Beth and John Paul for their presentation. We'll have more webinars coming in the winter and spring, so keep an eye on your email and the website, and we'll make the schedule available soon. If you have a topic you'd like to hear, a topic you'd like to present, please contact CCMA's Krista Bollinger at bollinger@ccmanet.org. And you will receive a follow-up feedback survey this week. Be sure to complete the brief survey so that we may continue to bring you webinars on topics that are of help and interest to you. Thank you again for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next one. And just another mention that all of these sessions are recorded. So if you haven't been able to join us for this, I believe it's the fifth and final in the series, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 are available, and you can view them all at your leisure through this system. So again, thank you, John Paul at Notre Dame. Thank you, Beth, University of Portland. And this is Frank Luca at the University of Massachusetts on the other coast, covering the entire US of A. So wish you all a Merry Christmas. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.